time on Globe Trekker, bask in the beauty of Vienna, one of the great capitals of Europe, home to Mozart, the waltz, and also the sausage.
Ah, there it is. It's my Käsekreiner.
Hey, it can't all be art and culture. We'll take you there on the next Globe Trekker.
Saturday night at 8, here on OPB.
He was one of the most provocative personalities in the history of television.
You're pulling my leg, aren't you?
Jack Paar played host to many of the most celebrated personalities of the 20th century. Join Jack and his very special guests on Jack Paar, Smart Television, exclusively on this public television station.
Now here's a word from Alka-Seltzer.
You're watching member-supported OPB.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. The Collins Foundation. The Collins Foundation is dedicated to improving the quality of life in Oregon.
Good evening, I'm Gwen Eiffel. Jim Lehrer is on vacation. On the NewsHour tonight, our summary of the news. Can the military force its members to take the anthrax vaccine? We debate a new court order. Where did you buy your holiday toys? We have a report on the toy store battle. What is the state of the world at year-end? 3 foreign affairs columnists share their views. Can women's professional sports succeed? We look at the experience on the soccer field and basketball court. And how do you translate a classic? A conversation about a new version of Don Quixote.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
Can you paint something beautiful with sunflowers? Can you drive forever on corn? ADM has found if you ask the right questions, nature will answer. By finding natural alternatives for many of the things we use every day, we're working to make the world less harmful to people and more friendly to the environment. ADM, the nature of what's to come.
And by the SBC companies, 125 years of sweat, of building networks, of getting the job done. After 125 years, we are just getting started. SBC, going beyond the call.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
A jury in Virginia spared the life of Lee Boyd Malveaux today, the teenager convicted in the Washington area sniper killings. Instead, the jury recommended life in prison without parole. Malveaux was 17 years old at the time of the shootings last year. He was convicted last week in one of the 10 sniper attacks. Victims' relatives and defense lawyers spoke today outside the courthouse in Chesapeake, Virginia.
They found all the mitigating factors in this, and they found him to be a danger in the future. And I realized it was probably because of his age. But to me, if you look at the law, we live in the law of our land, and I don't think there could be another case that would be more deserving of the capital punishment.
It was not an easy decision, and I don't know what any of the other speakers may have said before, but if there was any criticism of the jury's decision, it was certainly unwarranted. This was an agonizing and very difficult decision for them to go in and hold a young man's life in their hands, and to come out with the decision they did is a very gutsy decision. It's a very difficult one.
The defense argued Malveaux was heavily influenced by John Muhammad. Another jury has already convicted Muhammad and recommended he be put to death. Both defendants may yet face trials in the other killings. U.S. forces in Iraq moved against insurgents overnight and today, arresting more than 30 people. 8 people were captured in Baquba, north of Baghdad. They included a former Iraqi colonel who has allegedly recruited people to stage attacks. Wire service accounts said 4 other suspects were connected to Izzat Ibrahim al-Duri. The former vice president is believed to have a leading role in the insurgency. U.S. troops captured 26 other people west of Baghdad, including 2 former generals and a colonel. South Korea's governing cabinet approved a plan today to send 3,000 troops to Iraq. It would be the 3rd largest contingent in the coalition, after the United States and Great Britain. The South Korean parliament still has to give its approval. The U.S. Embassy in Bahrain warned today that terrorists might strike over the holidays. It urged Americans to be on their guard. And the Associated Press reported police in Turkey are expecting more attacks. The report quoted an intelligence document that said preparations for a large-scale 3rd wave of attacks have been completed. Last month, suicide bombings in Istanbul killed 62 people. Israeli forces raided a Gaza refugee camp today, killing 8 Palestinians and wounding more than 40. Israelis blamed Palestinian militants for starting firefights, but the Palestinians said Israeli snipers opened fire when people ran from their homes. Bulldozers knocked down buildings as troops searched for tunnels used to smuggle weapons from Egypt. Former Illinois Governor George Ryan pleaded not guilty today to federal corruption charges. The Republican politician allegedly took payoffs from 4 state contracts and leases, first as Illinois Secretary of State and later as governor. After the arraignment today, Ryan spoke at his attorney's office in Chicago.
I will not plea bargain. I'll go to trial and establish my innocence. And as I await my trial, I'll rely on the support of my family, my deep faith in God, and my abiding trust in the judicial system. I'm innocent, and the truth will come out in court.
Ryan was freed on $4,500 bail. A total of 66 people have been charged in the federal investigation that began 5.5 years ago. Mad cow disease may have been found in the United States for the first time. Agriculture Secretary Ann Veneman announced a suspected case today in Washington State involving a single cow. She said the farm where the animal was found will be quarantined pending lab tests. In the meantime, she said Americans should be confident in the food supply. In economic news today, the Commerce Department confirmed growth in the year's 3rd quarter was the best in 2 decades. The gross domestic product increased at an annual rate of 8.2%, matching the initial estimates. Another report said consumer spending was up 0.4% in November. That category accounts for 2/3 of economic activity. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 3 points to close at 10,341. The NASDAQ rose nearly 19 points to close at 1974. That's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to the military and the anthrax vaccine. The battle to sell this season's toys. A year-end view of the world, women going for the goal, and the art of translation. You've made your list, you've checked it twice, but for the retailers trying to sell you all those toys this year, it's been warfare. Elizabeth Brackett of WTTW Chicago reports.
Come on. It's been a busy morning for Santa in Marshall Field's flagship Chicago department store.
Now you tell me what you want for Christmas, okay?
Toy manufacturers and retailers are very interested in what kids are whispering to Santa Claus this year. That's because the toy business has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. Traditional department stores like Marshall Field's are no longer in the game.
We've been out of the toy business for a long, long time. And when I say out of the toy business, out of the traditional toy business, and having toys that you see on television, you know, every year that kids beg their mothers for.
Fields now sells only its own brand of toys, Creative Kid Stuff. Fields and other department stores cut back or got out of the toy business in the late 1980s when specialty retailers like Toys R Us began to dominate. Now, ironically, Toys R Us itself is in trouble. It recently had to close almost 200 of its Kids R Us and Imaginarium stores. The problem for Toys R Us? the competition from toy Goliath, Walmart.
When you have a family like mine, you need to watch the prices. I have 20 grandchildren, so
that brings you into Walmart.
Right. It makes a difference.
It is price that brings shoppers to Walmart. Walmart lowered prices, some to below wholesale levels, on Christmas products in October this year to bring customers in early and get the jump on the competition. On the day after Thanksgiving, Walmart reported the largest single-day sales totals ever, $1.52 billion. The retail giant strategy makes it tough for others to compete, says marketing professor Christy Nordhelm.
Walmart is driving this bus right now, and where they're driving it is to price. So to the extent that the other retailers say, price, all right, let's compete on price, that's what's winning, they're all going to lose because they can't dominate Walmart on price. They cannot beat Walmart at their own game.
Walmart now accounts for about 1/3 of many toy manufacturers' annual sales. Other stores can't match that clout. Stephen Clear, a marketing consultant for Trade Marketing Incorporated, says there are other reasons nobody can beat Walmart's price.
There are several ways that Walmart helps to keep the prices low. First of all, in their own cost structure. They don't put stores in high rent areas, they keep their labor costs low, they keep unions out, and they develop efficiencies in their systems that allow them to keep all of their costs across the board low, whether it's transportation or warehousing, all the things that we don't see when we go into a store. Then because of their size, they're able to negotiate with manufacturers to keep those prices low as well.
Walmart's success has attracted criticism.
The irony of that is that, in fact, by keeping those prices low and forcing manufacturers to cut costs in manufacturing and moving it offshore into other countries, they have put Americans out of work. Those Americans are Walmart shoppers, and that's the irony of price cutting and keeping prices low.
You push the button.
For Toys R Us, which stocks a much wider variety of toys and which often has stores in high-rent districts, competition is tough. About all store director Brian Chandler can do is match advertised prices.
In regards to price, what we do is for advertised prices in sales papers, we do a price match to those. So as far as price goes, we can offer truly an equal to or better, the equal to or the best price that's available. And how we differentiate ourselves from our competitors is we offer that through service.
But many consumers don't see the service at Toys R Us as enough of an added value to stave off Walmart, according to Nordhelm.
It looks bad for Toys R Us right now, or for any retailer who is simply obtaining toys from a manufacturer that can be also found at Walmart and not really adding any value to the shopping experience and also not necessarily providing those toys at a lower price than Walmart.
Clear says that the trade-off for lower prices may be fewer toys.
Walmart is so large that for a typical toy manufacturer, if they have an item that Walmart does not want to stock, they may stop producing that item. What happens then is that overall choice for the consumer goes down. Granted, what the consumer is buying at Walmart, they're buying at a very low price, but they will not find the selection of items at a Walmart that they would find at a Toys R Us, for instance.
One fabled name in the toy business, FAO Schwarz, has already lost badly in the toy wars. After emerging from bankruptcy earlier this year, the toy company tried to re-enter the market with boutiques in major department stores. In Chicago, Carson Perry Scott provided a home for the FAO Schwarz boutique. But in early December, the company again filed for bankruptcy, though it still hopes to find a buyer for FAO Schwarz and its Right Start brand. Nordhelm says FAO Schwarz got into trouble when it stopped promoting the store.
The added value of FAO Schwarz was the exclusivity, was the fact that you could only get it at FAO Schwarz. So you imagine the consumer decision process, and they either say, I want a leapfrog leap pad, and where should I go find it? Or they say, I want a toy, I'm going to go to FAO Schwarz to buy a toy. That's the difference. It's what they choose first, the brand or the retailer. And right now, consumers are choosing the brand and then the retailer, as opposed to the retailer and then the brand.
But there are specialty toy retailers that are doing very well. Sales at American Girl, an upscale doll retailer, have soared in the past few years. But out by Mattel in 1998, The 18-year-old company now has a $350 million net worth. As little girls and their dolls dine with their moms and grandmoms, it is clear that what is being sold here is the entire shopping experience.
I thought this is a nice way to bond with her and to do something special that she'll remember for the rest of her life.
And why did her granddaughter pick her doll?
Well, because she's beautiful. She has my hair. She has my eyes, some of it. And she's just really beautiful.
With small specialty stores like American Girl and giant retailers like Walmart thriving, the question is whether there will be room for toy marketers in the middle range to survive.
War and diplomacy in the year 2003. Margaret Warner has that.
To assess this extraordinary year for America and the world, we turn to three foreign affairs columnists: Jim Hoagland of the Washington Post, Trudy Rubin of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Andres Oppenheimer of the Miami Herald. Welcome to you all. Trudy, the war in Iraq was clearly the most dramatic event, foreign policy event of this year. Was it also the most significant in terms of having a lasting impact?
Well, I think the lasting impact is still for us to discover, because there are so many uncertainties connected with this war that we don't know how they'll turn out yet. But it was a dramatic event because it was revolutionary in its concept. This was a preemptive, really a preventive war. There was no direct casus belli. It was a war that was waged to revolutionize the Middle East. The president has talked about democracy for the whole region. This is revolutionary Wilsonianism. So it undertook immense goals. And I think it will be judged by whether it comes anywhere close to achieving them.
Do you agree with that, Jim Hoagland? Revolutionary in its concept.
Well, that's still to be seen, as Trudy has suggested. It is a very dramatic event, and it is part of a huge commitment that this American president has made toward the transformation of the region he calls the Greater Middle East. As his National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, makes clear, they see this as a generational commitment of the United States to begin in Iraq, to try to bring a democratic and stable government in Iraq, to move on then to the Israeli-Palestinian problem, and help with the creation of an independent Palestinian state, and hoping that these developments will really change the politics, the whole political structure of a region that was at the source of 9/11 and the source of a great deal of explosive bitterness and resentments. We are at the beginning of a new era, whether we succeed or we fail in Iraq.
Do you see it that way, Andres Oppenheimer, that the war in Iraq really signals the beginning of a new era?
I do agree with Jim and with Trudy that it was a dramatic and important event, but I think it will have a lasting impact on the relationship between the U.S. and the rest of the world. I think it has driven a wedge between the U.S. and its European allies, between the U.S. and Latin America, and we are not fully aware of that, most people in this country. I was sort of amazed by the information divide during the war. I made a trip to Mexico in the middle of the war with Iraq, and the minute I landed at the airport, I was surprised by the magazines, the newspapers, showing dismembered bodies and Iraqis dying all over the place, etc., etc. It was as if we were watching two different wars, and I think that will have a lasting impact. We're reading and seeing and watching on TV two versions of the same story, but through totally different perspectives.
Jim Hoagland, pick up on that. I mean, the critics said America, the Bush administration, was ready to go it alone and went it alone, that isn't the phrase, in Iraq. Has there been a fundamental shift that you think is lasting in terms of America's relationship with its allies and its whole concept of alliances?
I doubt that it's quite as fundamental as some people seem to believe. We are in a multi-year process. One of the things that will be remembered about 2003 was that it didn't stand alone so much as a year. It was a follow-on in many ways in the war against al-Qaeda and global terrorism from 2001. It is analogous perhaps to the late 1940s, when new alliances were beginning to be born, when The invasion of Korea, the Berlin blockade, other events caused NATO to be born and to become a strong and effective international alliance. Cold War ended some 12 years ago. We are seeing the effects of the end of the Cold War today in the bitter disputes that arose between France and Germany on the one hand and the United States on the other. But that does not mean that NATO has lost its relevance for today. Look at what NATO is doing in Afghanistan today and the role that it's likely to take on with French and German agreement in Iraq in the coming year or two. I think it can be overdone, the idea that somehow America's international alliances are unraveling or somehow we have irrevocably lost the support of the rest of the world. I don't believe that.
Do you believe that, Trudy?
Well, I think that you see that there's an effort now to recoup, to rebuild alliances. I think Jim Baker's trip was not just about debt reduction. It was sending out Mr. Fix-It, the man who put together the multilateral alliances of Bush 41's government. And so there will be an attempt to patch up. I think also the very revolutionary character of the Bush doctrine has yet to be proven, because in a way you can already see that the Iraq venture was one of a kind. This kind of preventive war with regime change can't be repeated. We don't have the manpower in the military, we don't have the wallet. And already, of the three countries in the axis of evil, Iraq is the one where there was regime change, but it is clear that the Bush administration is moving back towards negotiations on North Korea, on Iran. Deputy Secretary of State Armitage has said that the administration's policy is not regime change in Iran, and that was said publicly to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So I think that this doctrine may not be quite as revolutionary as it seemed, and there will be an attempt to patch up alliances after the fact.
Andres, that's true, isn't it, that despite the fact that this doctrine of preemption was issued in this national security directive, and it was so sweeping, or seemed to be in black and white, that it isn't being applied in these other examples. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, it wasn't entirely new. There was something similar during the Clinton administration, but nobody spelled it out and made such a fuss about it. Now, we are talking a lot about the U.S. relationship with other countries in terms of government-to-government relations. What troubles me, Margaret, is the battle for the hearts and minds of the people, because that's what's going to count in the long run. And we're not winning that. Jim may be right. We may be able to reconstruct our alliances. We may be able to rebuild different alliances. But if you look at the polls in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, anti-Americanism is growing substantially, has doubled in many countries. And ultimately, in the long run, that's what's going to breed new terrorists. So we can build all the alliances we want, but if we don't work on the hearts and minds of the people, in the long run, we're not going to win this war.
That is a very troubling development, isn't it, Jim Hoagland? I mean, wouldn't you say that in this past year, America's standing among the public in the world is down?
It certainly is down, and is something that we urgently need to address. We don't spend nearly enough time in this country as citizens or as members of the government thinking about how we appear to the rest of the world and how we can affect that. On the other hand, I think we do have to look at some of the reasons for this. Some of it is that simply we're the richest, biggest, most powerful nation. There's going to be natural resentment of that. More importantly, I think, is that the United States in the past year to two has become an agent of change, of radical change in international relations. The Bush administration has now succeeded, for better or for worse, in reshaping the strategic landscape in global affairs. Other nations, other peoples are forced to react to this very big, very intrusive power. They may not like being disturbed, particularly in areas like the Middle East, where we're saying you have to change your politics, your political structures, in many cases your form of government, because you've created huge problems for the rest of the world. That's not a message that's going to go down very easily, but it is a message that I think the time has come to deliver.
Trudy, what's your, go ahead, comment on this gulf that's widening between the U.S. as a power and the public and the rest of the world, much of the world?
Sometimes I think that half of the problem, maybe not quite half, but a lot of the problem this administration has with public opinion abroad is because some officials just can't zip their lip. So often there have been egregious remarks that have offended people unnecessarily, whether it's Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, whether it was the recent memo on contracts that came just as Secretary Baker was leaving. Even if at the end the administration gets what it wants, it unnecessarily alienates people along the way. In addition, I think when one puts out grandiose schema like democracy for the Middle East, then one is judged by whether one can meet them. And that thesis is so big, so huge, that it just invites people to distrust the United States because there's no way that one can deliver that grand thesis. So I think it would be better to show in the doing often than to be claiming that we're going to remake the world in our image.
So, Andres Oppenheimer, pick up on that. You know, the president said last week, he described 2003 as an extraordinary year for our country, abroad and at home. In 2003, he said, we've become a safer nation. But you were suggesting perhaps otherwise. Do you think the U.S. is more secure?
Margaret, I don't think so, and partly because of what I just said, the rising tide of anti-Americanism. But I think it goes beyond what Trudy just said. She's right, obviously, in saying that some Bush administration officials may not have been terribly smart in what they've said or done. But I'm more worried about longer-term trends. For instance, the things that our security, that our focus on security these days are doing that can hurt us in the long run. The diminishing waves of tourists to this country, the low levels of foreign students, the decline in academic exchanges, all these things that have resulted from the 2001 terrorist attacks from September 11 will hurt us, because these are the people that traditionally go back to the countries and become leaders of the future and become pro-American leaders. Now, so I'm worried about things that go far beyond what an official can say or not say today, or what the Bush administration says or does today. Some of these security measures we're implementing today, which are necessary, obviously this country has to do something to protect itself, but some of these measures will have an impact on what we were saying before, on the battle for the hearts and minds of the people abroad.
Trudy, a quick comment from you on that. Do you sense a sort of growing isolation, which is really what Andres is talking about?
I think that I will come back again to this gap between what we do and what we say. What we do in the future in Iraq is going to affect how people judge what we say about democracy. If we transfer sovereignty in a way that looks as if we hand-picked the candidates for a transitional government, that we wanted to dictate the results, then that will create just more distrust in the Middle East. People notice when we talk about democracy, and then if we don't act on it, and often we can't act on it because of security needs, then they notice that too. So I think the United States has to be very careful in what it advertises as its goals, and at least in Iraq, it has to understand that that means it can't have guaranteed outcomes in who emerges as Iraqi leaders.
All right, let me get a quick final comment from Jim Hoagland on this question of the U.S. more secure or more isolated.
Well, we slip into the political campaign here, in which this is going to be...
Let's not do that.
Yes, this is going to be the version of Ronald Reagan's question, are you better off than you were? And I think on specifics, the Bush administration can argue quite convincingly that they have become aware of a danger that was ignored before 9/11. They've begun to deal with it in some places, and I think overall the American public, as of today, would take that view.
Thanks very much, all three, and Happy New Year.
Now, women taking their best shots in professional sports. Kwame Holman reports.
Members of Washington, D.C.'s women's professional soccer team, the Freedom, didn't have long to celebrate. Just 3 weeks after the team won the championship of the Women's United Soccer Association in August, just 3 years after the league was founded, it folded. League officials actually said they were suspending operations, citing a $20 million budget shortfall and a lack of corporate sponsors. Fan support had dwindled as well. Only 7,000 attended the WUSA championship game. Standing in the Freedom's empty home stadium in Washington recently, Joe Cummings looked back on what happened to the league. He managed the Boston Breakers, one of the 8 original teams that made up the WUSA.
The growth from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 didn't happen as quickly as what we thought. Maybe we became a little bit impatient in how quickly that was going to develop.
The Women's United Soccer Association had been born amid the buzz created by the U.S. Women's World Cup victory over China 4 years ago. A sellout crowd in the Rose Bowl witnessed the sudden death shootout while 40 million fans watched on television. The victory generated attention never before given to women's soccer in America, or to men's soccer for that matter. Mia Hamm and Brandy Chastain became instant sports heroines, not just to traditional sports fans, but to millions of girls who had joined the youth soccer craze sweeping across America. All the elements needed to launch a successful women's professional soccer league appeared to be in place. But Joe Cummings now says the timing was wrong.
Couldn't have picked a worse 3-year period, I think, to probably launch than the economic times of the years 2001, 2002, and 2003. But what we did see early on that the attendance numbers were perhaps a little bit short of what we had projected, and certainly the sponsorship, from a sponsorship standpoint, we hadn't brought on the number of national sponsors that we thought we would in the first year.
Women's team sports never have drawn large audiences or big television ratings. ESPN, the multi-channeled sports network, gradually is finding more time for women on its 24-hour schedule. But in 3 years, women's soccer couldn't generate the revenue, sponsorships, or endorsements needed to keep it afloat.
It's very sad that they couldn't pull it off because it's a great sport. It did have the great stars, but in their case, it just takes a lot of money to keep it going.
David Stern ought to know what it takes. He's commissioner of the National Basketball Association, which in turn created and currently bankrolls the WNBA, the Women's Professional Basketball League. The players may be on target, but here too, attendance for the 7-year-old league has missed the mark. In fact, the Cleveland Rockers of the WNBA folded in September, just days after the Women's Soccer League did. But Commissioner Stern is convinced women's professional basketball and soccer have a future.
There's a huge change taking place in this country with respect to young women and what they're encouraged to do, what they're empowered to do. The WUSA and the WNBA are really on the cutting edge of that. And there really is going to be a significant change in the way sponsors pitch their products and in the way the more than 50% of the country that happens to be female makes their purchasing decisions, and sports is going to begin to influence them the same way it has historically been geared to sponsors who want to influence men.
Joe Cummings is banking on that change and is spearheading an effort to reorganize the WUSA, these days making presentations to potential sponsors and listing the help of women's sports advocates. To secure the financial support to resurrect the league, Cummings says investors need reassurance.
I mean, you can't go through what we went through for 3 years, announce a suspension, and just start up again with the same model, the same business plan. So you have to make sure that in this partnership, you're showing them that you're headed in a different direction and you're headed toward some level of financial viability.
Reaching that viability, getting fans to buy a seat or switch channels to a women's sporting event has been a hard sell. Fans are watching women participate in individual sports, such as golf's Annika Sorenstam and sister stars Venus and Serena Williams in tennis. Attendance and TV ratings for those events have soared. But the bulk of the fans' interest, attendance, and television coverage focuses on the men: football, baseball, basketball, and golf. In the opinion of Donna Lopiano, director of the Women's Sports Foundation, the struggle of women's team sports has been a failure of creative marketing. Lopiano says more women are needed in decision-making roles in all sports-related entities. She says right now they aren't there.
We have a situation right now where, with regard to corporate sponsors, and especially in the sporting goods and apparel industry, the great majority of these people are still run by guys as decision makers who are passionate about men's sports and who haven't yet gotten the passion for women's sports. We need, passionate leaders like a David Stern who says, guess what, I want to own basketball, and I don't care if women play it or monkeys play it or it's played in Europe, I'm going to own it and I'm going to make it successful, and he's the kind of marketer who can make it successful.
This is a business proposition. This is about television, this is about sponsorships, this is about filling buildings, this is about demonstrating sport at the highest level at which it is played.
And Stern says that includes the highest level at which women play.
We're seeing things that are being done by young women at the high school level that the NBA players probably a few decades ago couldn't do. So you can see the talent level, and so the circle sort of goes around, and good game, good prospects, enjoyable competition, great role models for young women and young men, I might add, because these are athletes who are just great at what they do, and the sponsors are not far behind.
Felita Phillips hopes that bigger stage for women's sports is coming, but she says the girls she coaches at Stone Ridge High School in suburban Maryland aren't depending on it.
Soccer, women's sports is not for the fame, it's for the fun. And you have to enjoy what you're doing. I mean, they're not looking for the big paycheck to go play pro. At least they have the ability to maybe get a scholarship and go to college.
And since the advent of Title IX, federal legislation giving women equality in high school and college sports, more and more are playing competitively.
Yeah, I don't think going pro, not that good, but it's fun when you're in high school and maybe in college.
Still, some of these Stone Ridge players don't understand why the women who do go pro don't get the exposure men do.
People probably think that men take sports more seriously and that they're more into the game, more competitive, and they might not think that girls are as interested in sports, so they think that it's not as important, that they shouldn't play them as much on TV because no one's going to watch them.
But John Crone admits he watches. The Yorktown, Virginia high school athlete says he actually prefers watching women's soccer.
Women's sports is just a lot of fun to watch. I think it's a lot more fun to watch because they're a lot more serious than sometimes guys, especially with soccer. Because the guys soccer, they fall down whenever someone they barely get touched, but the women, they just get up and they're all tough about it. So I don't know, I just love watching women's sports.
Joe Cummings hopes such sentiment will continue to grow, but says he's come to realize his women's soccer league probably can't duplicate the success of the men's games.
Maybe what the WUSA is a sport that's followed by 8, 9, or 10,000 people on a very regular basis, not 60,000 people on a very regular basis. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't exist and couldn't go forward. That doesn't mean that we haven't succeeded. It just means that we've succeeded at a different level.
In fact, Cummings says the league is making plans to host a series of what he calls soccer festivals next summer and hopes to return with a full league schedule in 2005.
The anthrax debate. Yesterday, a federal judge in Washington ordered the Pentagon to halt mandatory anthrax inoculations for military personnel. Ray Suarez has that story.
Ever since the Pentagon ordered all U.S. military personnel to get the anthrax vaccine in 1998, there's been resistance from some U.S. troops. Some complained of side effects, others quit the armed forces, and still others sued. Yesterday, 6 unidentified plaintiffs won a key victory in federal court. In his ruling, Judge Emmett Sullivan noted that the vaccine is used in part to prevent the inhaled airborne form of anthrax. And that, said Judge Sullivan, makes the drug an investigational one, not approved by the FDA for such use. The judge ordered the forced vaccinations to stop, and he concluded the United States cannot demand that members of the armed forces also serve as guinea pigs for experimental drugs. Pentagon officials, including Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, have not said whether the department will follow the judge's preliminary injunction.
So what's your response to the judge's suggestion that the Pentagon has used troops as guinea pigs for an experimental drug?
The decision is recent. The lawyers are examining it, and at the appropriate time, they will be making a recommendation as to the way forward. The only kind of thing I would say in addition is, obviously, the comment that you quoted, if in fact the judge said it, is inaccurate.
General Richard Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, defended the vaccine.
From a military standpoint, I think it's extremely important. As you know, when we went into Iraq, we had all the troops in their chemical protective gear because we thought there was a very real threat of either chemical or biological weapons, and in particular, anthrax was a big worry.
In all, some 800,000 members of the military have received anthrax injections, many just before the Iraq War. Since the program began in the late 1990s, plaintiffs say as many as 1,000 people have refused the vaccine. The Pentagon says its numbers are much smaller. For more on the future of the Pentagon's anthrax inoculation program, we get two views. Dr. William Winkenwerder is Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, and Republican Congressman Christopher Shays of Connecticut is chairman of the Government Reform Subcommittee on National Security. His committee has conducted an extensive investigation of the Pentagon's anthrax program. Well, Dr. Winkenwerder, the Department of Defense has had a couple of more hours to absorb the ruling, digest it. You've just come from a top-level meeting on it. What's your response to Judge Sullivan's ruling?
Well, we're still working through the issue and through the legal options, and I would just say that we fully intend to comply with all of our legal obligations in this instance.
What are your obligations as you understand them?
Well, that's just the issue. We're seeking to understand, will be seeking to understand from the judge to have him clarify his decision further for us so that we're clearer with respect to whom it applies, the scope and the breadth of this decision, and that and other questions that we want to ask will help, I think, clear the path forward.
As troops turn over in Iraq, for instance, there are units all over the country preparing to ship out. If someone refuses their injection tomorrow, what happens to them?
Well, first of all, it would be practically impossible for us to get out on such short notice any what we call issuing guidelines or regulations as to how to handle the situation. So under any circumstance, we're going to need at least a few days to turn the ship, so to speak. We're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and we want to be very clear and very specific about the guidance that we need to operate under. And so that would just in terms of practical terms take at least a couple of days to sort out.
Representative Shays, what was your reaction to Judge Sullivan's ruling?
Well, it's basically what we've been saying for a number of years. I'm getting an echo, by the way. This is a program that is basically illegal. That's what the judge said. And he put an injunction and said, stop the program. He said, stop the program because they are using our troops in an experimental program. This vaccine is a 1950s vaccine. The only thing it has going for it that it's old, not that it's good. It's 6 shots, not 1 shot. And because of that, there are side effects because of its not being as pure a vaccine as a newer one. And we have troops that simply don't want to be guinea pigs.
Do you feel you have the science to back you up on this, Doctor?
Well, I think the Congressman's characterization of the program is not accurate. I certainly respect Congressman Shays. He and I have worked together on this issue. This is an FDA-licensed product. We've been using it fully aware by the FDA under the licensing terms for 6 years. There is a study. The Institute of Medicine of the National Academy of Sciences produced an exhaustive 250-page study, totally independent of the Department of Defense, that said the vaccine is safe and it's effective against all forms of anthrax, including inhalational anthrax. And so we obviously were quite perplexed and surprised by this decision by the judge. But we're going to comply with our legal obligations. We're going to do the right thing. I would just say that speaking as a physician, speaking as someone who has to be responsible for the health and safety of our service members, I believe that the vaccine is safe and effective, and I believe it's an important layer of protection that we're able to offer them when we know that the threat is still there. It's still real in certain parts of the world. And we know that terrorist groups have expressed a keen interest in bioweapons, and anthrax is right at the top of the list.
Congressman, you said it's an old drug. Does that necessarily mean it's a bad drug?
No, it doesn't mean it's a bad drug for what it was intended. It was intended for not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not millions. It was intended for hundreds of veterinarians, basically. That's what its intention was for. And it was proved and approved by the FDA for that purpose, not for weaponized defense. It wasn't approved for the use it's being used for right now. That's why the judge ruled that this program is illegal. It's illegal because it is not FDA approved for the purpose for which it is being used. It is not voluntary, and when you do an investigative process like they're doing, it has to be voluntary. It's crazy that this was universal. They were having people at the Pentagon have to take this, not just the folks that were going into the Middle East. It was a program done by the past administration. For the life of me, I don't know why this administration is insisting on doing this program. And let me say, we said in our report in 2000, get a new drug, not 6 shots, 1 shot. And they simply have been slow to do that. It's just really a pathetic program that is so regretful that they consider to keep going on. It just boggles my mind.
I can't not respond to that. Again, with all due respect to the Congressman, if I recall correctly, Congressman Shays, you were commending the program when we reinitiated it and commending our efforts in June of 2002 when we restarted the program, indicating that it was thoughtful and appropriate. And so that, along with, I'm not going to substitute anyone's opinion for the best experts who've looked at this and who have come to the conclusion that the vaccine is safe and effective. That does not address the...
Is it FDA approved for the purpose it's being used? The answer is no. And that's why the judge threw it out. You can't invent something...
We have sought the judgment of the FDA on this issue. This was sought in 1997, and the statement...
They did not approve it.
No, the statement that was... Let me just say, the statement that was provided was the use that we had put in front of them for protection against inhalational anthrax and raise that question. Their response was not inconsistent with the current labeling, and that is for other forms of anthrax. That's very common in medicine, that a different indication or different use for the very same, it would be as if we were saying that for influenza, that whether you got the influenza by ingesting it in your mouth or on your skin, or as opposed to inhaling it in your lungs, that there was somehow a difference in terms of how flu vaccine works. The science doesn't support that. The science says that if it works against the bug, it works against the bug. And so that's what the experts have said. That's been our interpretation. That's been the FDA's interpretation. Obviously, the judge here has substituted his judgment, but this needs to be clarified.
Well, quick response, Congressman. Do you want more study to check that this is right against inhaled rather than the skin form of anthrax?
In 1996, they applied this drug to be an investigative new drug. The FDA has not approved it. There have been no protocols to establish this program. They just basically invented this program. You're supposed to have 6 shots. They don't do 6 shots. That's what the protocol says. Now, when they didn't have enough vaccines and they made it voluntary, I said, that's a good step. That's a wise thing to do. Make it voluntary, and in certain very specific instances, make it mandatory if the president signs off. I think that makes sense. I can't tell you how strongly the veterans and others and the people in the military resent that they're being used as...
I'm going to have to jump in and stop this now, but we're going to revisit this issue when the Department of Defense comes up with a response to the judge's ruling. Can I just make one last point? Sorry, we're out of time. Thanks a lot, Doctor.
Finally tonight, a new book conversation on the art of translation. Arts correspondent Jeffrey Brown has that.
Last year, a panel of 100 writers from around the world picked Don Quixote as the greatest novel of all time. Now, translator Edith Grossman has produced a new English-language version of Miguel Cervantes' Spanish classic from the early 1600s. Grossman has been known until now for her translations of contemporary Latin American authors. Don Quixote's tilting with windmills and other adventures, of course, have been the stuff of magazines, musicals, and the Western imagination for 400 years. I talked with Edith Grossman recently in her New York apartment.
So you have a major classic by any standard, and you have to sit down to translate it. It must be scary?
Terrifying.
Why?
Terrifying. Part of it is the weight of 400 years of scholarship. The other part is the immense responsibility involved in translating a book of this stature, and the influence that your translation will have on readers.
What is it that makes it so compelling? I mean, why does it still have influence almost 400 years later?
Part of it has to do with the writing style of Cervantes, who is a brilliant writer. Another part of it has to do with the characters he created, who are truly modern in the sense that they are not, at the end of the novel, who they were at the beginning, but they change and grow and develop and have an impact on the world, and the world has an impact on them, and they interact with each other and with other people whom they meet.
One of the things that you say in your preface is that the essential challenge in translation is discovering the voice to write the text in English, taking the Spanish and finding the voice in English. What do you mean by that?
Ralph Mannheim, who was a translator from German, once said that translators are like actors who say other people's lines and speak as the author would speak if the author spoke English. And so what we try to do, what translators try to do, is hear that voice and find the voice in English that matches it. I'm trying to reach to contemporary readers, but I am also, translating is rather schizophrenic, so I'm trying to reach back as well to the authentic sound of the author. And what I mean by sound and voice is that there is elevated diction, for example. The difference between Don Quixote's ordinary language and Sancho's ordinary language is enormous. Quixote is a very well-educated man, and Sancho Panza is illiterate. So their levels of language are different. Cervantes makes it very clear that they're different. And what I was trying to do was to recreate that difference in English.
But when you're dealing with an older book, how do you make it come alive for a contemporary audience?
In the case of Cervantes, I kept telling myself that when he wrote it, it was not archaic. He was not writing a quaint Spanish. It was not archaic Spanish. He really pushed the envelope. He really created a literary language. And the dynamism of his language was something that I tried very hard to get into English.
Why don't you read some, just to give us a little flavor of it?
Perhaps I'll read from the very first chapter, the first part, which explains how Don Quixote became so devoted to the books of chivalry, which were 200 or 300 years out of date at the time that Don Quixote was living, that he lost his mind from reading too much. That's not something that you and I suffer from. Our gentleman became so caught up in reading that he spent his nights reading from dusk till dawn and his days reading from sunrise to sunset. And so with too little sleep and too much reading, his brains dried up, causing him to lose his mind. His fantasy filled with everything he had read in his books, enchantments as well as combats, battles, challenges, wounds, courtings, loves, torments, and other impossible foolishness. And he became so convinced in his imagination of the truth of all the countless grandiloquent and false inventions he read that for him No history in the world was truer.
So he lost his mind from reading too much.
That's right. His madness is that he believes that this thing which was fiction in fact existed, because the chivalry that influences him is a literary chivalry and not an actual historical chivalry.
Cervantes was, in a sense, winking at his readership of the time, correct?
In the sense that the novels of chivalry were the reality TV of their day. It was the most popular form in Spain, and everyone read novels of chivalry. It's what people did with their leisure time. And he simply destroyed the genre by laughing at it, by way of Don Quixote.
What are you hoping that a new readership of Don Quixote will get from it?
Enormous pleasure. And the opportunity, if it's the first time they're reading the book, to experience a masterpiece.
Okay, Edith Grossman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, the major developments of the day. A jury in Virginia recommended life in prison without parole for teenager Lee Boyd Malveaux in the Washington area sniper killings. U.S. forces in Iraq arrested more than 30 people. Several suspects were former high-ranking Iraqi officers. And a suspected case of mad cow disease was found in Washington state. If confirmed, it would be the first such case in the United States. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Gwen Eiffel. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
What if we looked at the world as one giant farm field? In tomorrow's global food economy, every crop will grow where it grows best. And ADM can link farmers to almost any market in the world. This offers a natural alternative to improve agricultural efficiency, make food more affordable, and feed a hungry world. ADM, the nature of what's to come.
And by SBC Communications, committed to providing Americans more choices in high-speed internet access and working to widen opportunities in broadband technology. As providers, as people, we're SBC Communications.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
To purchase video cassettes of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, call 1-866-678-NEWS.
We are PBS.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. The Collins Foundation. The Collins Foundation is dedicated to improving the quality of life in Oregon.
This holiday season, join the students and faculty of Baylor University's renowned School of Music. Christmas at Baylor, from Jones Concert Hall to the magnificent Armstrong Browning Library to cross-campus carolers, a beautiful procession of beloved music ringing Christmas home into every heart.
Join us tonight at 9 here on OPB.
From Temple Square in Salt Lake City, the Utah Symphony and the Mormon Tabernacle Choir welcome the holiday season with a performance of Ralph Vaughan Williams' glorious Christmas cantata, Hodie, and the music by Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, and Menotti. Keith Lockhart conducts The Gift of Music.
Join us tonight at 10 here on OPB. business partner, Chinook Book, has made a contribution to the OPB Program Fund for Excellence. Additional funding has been provided by you, the contributing members of OPB.
Hi, I'm Jeff Douglas with OPB. If you became a member during our recent membership drive, thank you for joining OPB. You're now a member of a community of people that is more than 100,000